The short story I'm reading to you out of this book is called An Unfinished Love Story. It's kind of nice. Okay, let's get started. An Unfinished Love Story. Brooke looked down the heavy, awkward slip rails, and the gaunt cattle stumbled through with aggravating deliberation and scattered slowly among the native apple trees along the sideling. First there came an old, easy-going red poley cow, then a dusty white cow, then two shaggy, half-grown calves who seemed already to have lost all interest in existence, and after them a couple of babies, sleek, glossy, and cheerful. Then three more tired-looking cows with ragged udders and hollowed sides, then a lanky, barren heifer, red, of course, with half-blind eyes and one crooked horn. She was noted for her great ability in jumping 2 rail fences, and she was known to the selector as Queen Elizabeth. And behind her came a young, cream-coloured milker, a mighty proud and contented young mother, painfully and patiently dragging her first calf, which was hanging obstinately to her teat, with its head beneath her hind legs. Last of all there came an inevitable red steer, who scratched out the dust and let a stupid boo-er out of him as he sniffed at the rails. Brooke had shifted the rails there often before, 15 years ago, perhaps the self-same rails, for stringy bark lasts a long time, and the action brought the past near to him, nearer than he wished. He did not like to think of that hungry, wretched selection existence. He felt more contempt than pity for that old-fashioned, unhappy boy who used to let down the rails and drive the cattle through. Pardon me. He had spent those 15 years in cities and had come here prompted by more curiosity than anything else to have a quiet holiday. His father was dead. His other relations had moved away, leaving a tenant on the old selection. Brooke rested his elbow on the top of an adjacent panel and watched the cattle pass, and thought until Lizzie, the tenant's niece, shoved the red steer through and stood gravely regarding him. Brooke, that is, not the steer. Then he shifted his back at the fence and looked at her. He had not so much looked at her. A short, plain, thin girl of 19 with rather vacant grey eyes, dark ringlets and freckles. She had no complexion to speak of. She wore an ill-fitted print frock and a pair of men's elastic size, several sizes too large for her. She was studying for a school teacher, and that was the height of ambition of local youth. Brooke was studying her. He turned away to pull up the rails. The lower rail went into its place all right, but the top one had got jammed, and it stuck as though it was spiked. He worked the rail up and down, to and fro, took it under his arm and tugged it, but he might as well have pulled it at one of the posts. Then he lifted the loose end as high as he could and let it fall, jumping back out of the way at the same time. This loosened it, but when he lifted it again, it slid so easily and far into its socket that the other end came out and fell, barking Brooke's knee. He swore a little, then tackled the ground. He had the same trouble as before with the other end, but succeeded the last. Then he turned away, rubbing his knee. Lizzie hadn't smiled, not once. She watched him gravely all the while. "Did you hurt your knee?" she asked, without emotion. "No, the rail did." She reflected solemnly for a while, and then asked if it felt sore. He replied rather briefly in a negative. "They were always nasty, awkward rails to put up," she remarked, after some more reflection. Brooke agreed, and they turned their faces towards the homestead. Halfway down the sideling was a clump of saplings, with a big log lying amongst them. Here Brooke paused. "We'll sit down for a while and have a rest," said he. "Sit down, Lizzie." She obeyed with the greatest of gravity. Nothing was said for a while. She sat there with her hands folded in her lap, gazing thoughtfully at the ridge, which was growing dim. It looked better when it was dim, and so did the rest of the scenery. There was no beauty lost when the darkness hid behind the scenery. Brooke wondered what the girl was thinking about. The silence between them did not seem awkward somehow, but it didn't suit him just then, and so presently he broke it. "Well, I must go tomorrow." "Well, I must go tomorrow." "Must you?" "Yes." She thought a while, and then she asked him if he was glad to go. "Well, I don't know. Are you sorry, Lizzie?" She thought a good long while, and then she said she was. He moved closer to the girl, and suddenly slipped his arm around her waist. She did not seem agitated. She still gazed dreamily at the line of ridges, but her head inclined slightly towards him. "Lizzie, did you ever love anyone?" Then, anticipating the usual reply, "Except, of course, your father and mother and that sort of thing." Then abruptly, "I mean, did you ever have a sweetheart?" She reflected so as to be sure. Then she said she hadn't. A long pause, and he, the city man, breathed hard, not the girl. Suddenly he moved nervously and said, Lizzie, do you know what love means?" She pondered over this for some minutes, as a result of which she said she had thought that she did. "Lizzie, do you think you can love me?" She didn't seem able to find an answer to that. So he caught her to him in both arms and kissed her hard and long on the mouth. She was agitated now. She had some complexion now. She struggled to her feet, trembling. "We must go now," she said quickly. "They'll be waiting for tea." He stood up before her and held her there by both hands. "There is plenty of time, Lizzie." "Mr. Booker, Lizzie, come to your tea," yelled a boy from the house. "We really must go now. And they can wait a minute, Lizzie. Don't be frightened," bending his knee. "Lizzie, put your arms around my neck and kiss me, now. Do as I tell you, Lizzie. They cannot see us." And he drew her behind a bush. "Now, Lizzie." She obeyed just as a frightened child might. "We must go now," she panted, breathless from such an embrace. "Lizzie, you will come for a walk with me after tea?" "I don't know. I can't promise. I don't think it would be right. Aunt mightn't like me to." "Never mind, Aunt. I'll fix her. We'll go for a walk over to the school teacher's place. It'll be bright moonlight." "I don't like to promise. My father and mother might not. What are you frightened of? What harm is there in it?" Then softly, "Promise, Lizzie." She was hesitating. "Promise, Lizzie. I'm going away tomorrow. Might never see you again. You will come, Lizzie. It will be our last talk together. Promise, Lizzie." "Oh, then if you don't like to, I won't press you. Will you come? Or no?" "Yes. One more and I'll take you home." It was nearly dark. Brooke was moved to get up early the next morning and give a girl a hand with the cows. There were 2 rickety bales in the yard. He had not forgotten how to milk, but the occupation gave him no pleasure. It brought the past near again. Now and then he would turn his face, rest his head against the side of the cow, and watch Lizzie at her work. And each time she would, as though in obedience to an influence she could not resist, turn her head to face him. Having noted the pause in his milking, There was wonder in her expression, as if something had come into her life she could not realize, curiosity in his. When the spare pail was full, he would follow her with it to the little bark dairy. She held out the cloth which served as a strainer whilst he poured the milk in, and the last drops went through. Their mouths would come together. He carried the slop buckets to the pigsty for her and helped her to potty a young calf. He had to grip the calf by the nape of the neck, insert a forefinger in its mouth, and force its nose down into an oil drum full of skim milk. The calf sucked, thinking it had a treat, thinking it had a teat, and so it was taught to drink. The calves have a habit, born of instinct, of butting the udders with their nose. By way of this, by way of reminding their mothers to let down the milk, and so this calf butted at times, splashing sour milk over Brooke, and barking his wrist against the sharp edge of the drum. Then he would swear a little, and Lizzie would smile sadly and gravely. Brooke did not go away that day, nor the next, but he took a coach on the third day thereafter. He and Lizzie found a quiet corner to say goodbye, and she showed some emotion for the first time, or perhaps the second, or maybe even the third time in that week of her life. They had been out together in the moonlight every evening. Brooke had been 15 years in the cities. Had scarcely looked at each other that morning, and scarcely spoken. He looked back as the coach started and saw her sitting inside the big kitchen window. She waved her hand, hopelessly it seemed. She had rolled up her sleeve, and to Brooke the arm seemed strangely white and fair above the line of sunburn around her wrist. He hadn't noticed it before. Her face seemed fairer too, but perhaps it was just the effect of light and shade around that window. He looked back again as the coach turned the corner of the fence, and was just in time to see her bury her face in her hands with a passionate gesture which did not seem natural to her. Brooke reached the city the next morning, and after hours he staggered in through a private side entrance to the light parlour of the private bar. They say that Lizzie broke her heart that year, but then the world does not believe in such things nowadays. And that's that story.